Good evening and welcome to the October 20th meeting of the St. Mary's County Economic Development Commission. My name is Elizabeth Torgerson. I am the chairman of the EDC, and ordinarily the first topic would be to approve the minutes, but we just completed them, and so we do not yet have them up for approval. Going on to the next item is the comprehensive plan update overview. And Chris, I believe that you will be leading that one.
So actually, first we're going to do announcements. So again, I'm Chris Caslemas. I'm the Director of Economic Development for the county. And with me is Destiny Mitchell. And I'm going to turn it over to Destiny for announcements.
Okay, so we have a few things happening next week. Trying to talk and move this at the same time. So next week is Economic Development Week for the state of Maryland. So in support of Economic Development Week, we went ahead and highlighted a few events happening in St. Mary's County and some throughout the state, Southern Maryland. So I do want to point out, next Tuesday is an our Aero Park Business Tour and Smart Building Tour. So each EDC member received a calendar invitation from Kelly about a week or two ago. So if you do plan on attending, please make sure you respond to that link that was sent out. At 1:30, we will have the Smart Building Tour is going to be 30 minutes from 1:30 to 2 o'clock. And then you can choose to just do that tour, or you can also attend the Aero Park Business Walk. So we'll be reviewing 5 businesses. We'll see, I don't have all of them in front of me right now, but we'll see Alliant, you'll see the UAS test site, Techport, and I think ABSI as well. So it's five organizations you'll see, and we'll get to walk through and see the inside of those hangar spaces and hear about those companies and organizations as well. So definitely RSVP to that invite if you received it. And then I also want to highlight on the October 28th, there is a Southern Maryland Innovates and Small Business Development Center event, which is just a trivia night because this month is also Manufacturers Month. So we're inviting all manufacturers, makers, and those who are curious about that to join our trivia night, and there will be prizes and giveaways. But there are handouts for each of those right here on this table. And yeah, and then I think I didn't show the flyer, but this is flyer for the trivia night. This is the flyer for, I didn't mention, but there is a community event called Halloween in the Square next Saturday. So this is one of the first efforts for the Lexington Park Business Association to be. It's not completely foreign, but the LexBA is definitely supporting this event. It's going to be a community event for the kids. So there's going to be a lot of, there's going to be a magician, there's going to be food and candy, and they're asking businesses to support with candy, or you can even set up a table and give out trinkets and information. And so those are all the announcements I have.
Thank you, Destiny. So as Elizabeth said, that our first presentation, item number 4 on the agenda, is a comprehensive plan update. So with us today is Bill Hunt. He's the Director of Land Use and Growth Management Department for the county, and he has a PowerPoint for us, and he's going to explain what they're doing. So I will move out of the way to make room for Bill Hunt.
Thank you, everyone. It's nice to be here.
To meet you.
Not to worry, if you've looked at the PowerPoint on board docs, that was the reason why it's there. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. I see I've got 5 minutes, and I'm going to respect that. I can get to you what I think is important within that time, because basically what I want to do, next slide, Destiny, is tell you where you can find what it's important for you to know as the comprehensive plan update gets underway. This is a banner that's on the county homepage. If you click on that, next, Destiny, that will take you to a page that at the bottom has a link to a survey that we're trying to get residents' input regarding what they like about St. Mary's, what they would like changed, what they think about comprehensive planning and things like that. Next. Then if you go to the Land Use and Growth Management homepage, which this is a copy of, you see the two boxes. The first one, the top one, is the update page, and then underneath that is another link to the survey, which I've just gone over. Next one. So if you go to the update page, this is the important one. You see some information on, this is my left, I guess it's the left side of the screen, I'm not sure, where it says website links that has some information about comprehensive planning in general. But the important part about this to me is that what we've done is taken the comprehensive plans that you see the dates there, and we've scanned those and made them searchable PDFs. And going along with that, we've separated out the goals, objectives, and policies of those plans and put them into separate PDFs. The reason why this was done is there's an archive of St. Mary's County plans that's over 50 years old. The key is, I think, as this is an update, we're not trying to rewrite it, is to look and see what has been important in the past and then link that with what you see today. Next one. Because the state requires the update, and this one was delayed because of the census. Just for information, you may already know, but the 2020 population is 113,777, an increase of 8.2%. Next. That's again the comprehensive plans that have been done and scanned. Next. The state requires visions to be included in a comprehensive plan, and there are some of the important ones. And then economic development is one of the visions. It's on the next slide. The county also has the economic development. You don't need to keep up with me at this point. I think I'm just going to go off script and get done at 4.5 minutes. What you'll see in the rest of the PowerPoint on board docs is what I've done is I've gone into the 2010 comprehensive plan and pulled out those items related to economic development, including goals, objectives, and policies, and the chapter devoted to economic development, the visions, the aspirations, so that you can easily find them. I think what's important for the county is that you know as a group what has been thought about in the recent past, and to the extent that you're able to do it, either this group or in your own businesses or your own personal interests, provide input as to how can the aspirations, either those that you see recorded or those that you might have, be linked with implementation actions. Because if you go through the PowerPoint that I've done, and then if you look at these other plans that are scanned, there's usually, I would almost say always, a disconnect between aspiration and implementation, and that's where things fall apart. So what I'm going to try to suggest for this update with the Planning Commission is to ask them to focus on what's been constant for the last 50 years or so, sorry Amy, and what aspirations are still valid, but as they're thinking about that, what can be done to implement those things that residents have consistently considered to be important for the county. One thing I'd like to remind, or perhaps tell you for the first time, Land Use and Growth Management has 6 divisions. Of those 6, 1 is comprehensive planning. We have 29 employees when we're fully staffed, which hasn't happened in a number of years. But in the comprehensive planning division, there are 3 full-time employees. In addition to trying to do long-range planning, this comprehensive plan, those planners also review concept site plans, minor site plans, subdivisions for consistency with the comprehensive plan. We have a capital facilities planner who also is in planning division. He looks at things like sewer availability and to a certain extent roads, though the most of the roads is done by Department of Public Works and Transportation. And then the third one is primarily historic preservation and the Metropolitan Planning Organization, which is regional planning for the region. So with all of that, I say that to say that when it comes to any element of the plan, any help that we can get with distilling down what's important and how to implement it would be a big benefit to land use and growth management. That's what I have for you tonight within 5 minutes. If there's some general questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them. But really, I wanted to show and get it out where to find the survey and where to find the comprehensive plans so that people can do the research and make up their own minds as to what is important for the county for the next update to the plan.
I did have a comment to make regarding that survey. It was kind of interesting on social media. I was forwarded that link and I did fill it out. So it's kind of neat to see that it's getting out there and getting some visibility from the community.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, that was, we were excited to do that. Recreation and Parks has been doing SurveyMonkey for a long time. Land Use and Growth Management hasn't been. This was the first one that we tried. The Planning Commission actually wrote the text with our help, but we thought it was well edited by them, and I hope it's effective.
What is the time frame for getting comments in through the survey? You might have mentioned and I missed it.
I
Sorry.
didn't mention it. The first run of it will end October 31st. We started in mid-August. We're going to run to October 31st. As we go forward, we may either modify it or do a different one depending upon what seems to be appropriate based on public response, either to that or to the process in general.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Oh, sorry.
Yes, ask him to the mic.
Keep it simple. Oops, let me walk around to you. There you are. Hi, Bill. Just a question. You know, when you look at the last economic development plan, there's a great emphasis on South County. And one of the things that is pointed out there is the difficulty of having development in a part of a county where there is so much waterfront and so many areas that cannot be used for development, and how that ties in with the lack of economic development and poverty, quite frankly, in the southern county. And the decision by the commissioners, if I am interpreting this correctly, and you can correct me, Chris, was that there should be a level of forbearance to permit the development in those counties. One of the issues, of course, was, for example, how can you get a license to build a waterfront restaurant in the South County? Well, you can't, simply because the zoning and the plan that you've come up with is such that it really is virtually impossible. And yet, you can within the bounds of Leonardtown. So what can be done in order to create some equivalency there? And what is the interaction between your new plan and the new economic development plan that we are currently developing? Recommendations from your side in terms of how we can develop economically in some of these areas that are really limited because of the zoning regulations, etc.
You're conflating three things there. My office will be happy to defer in large measure to the economic development plan developed by the Department of Economic Development, just like we will defer to the transportation plan that's being worked on by the Department of Planning, Department of Public Works and Transportation. We won't put in this plan any goals or policies or objectives that contradict economic development. When you talk about zoning, zoning implements the comprehensive plan. So the zoning regulations will be consistent with the comprehensive plan as they are now.
Would it be possible for you to review some of the recommendations we come up with and add comments before we go too far down the line?
As soon as you get them to us, we'll review them.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Bill. And I know a lot of discussions that we've had at this table and with your work groups have been around issues that are almost more land use and growth management, comprehensive plan related than economic development. So I would encourage you to get involved, take the survey. Any other methods there is to get involved, I would encourage you to do so. All right. The other person we invited tonight was Arthur Shepard, our Recreation and Parks Director. They're going through a process now to update their Land Preservation, Parks, and Recreation Plan, LPPRP. But unfortunately, tonight they're actually, well, not unfortunate for us, not unfortunate for them, they're actually at Wacomico Shores Golf Course getting input for their plan. So they and Christina Bishop from his office I have an open meeting tonight at Wacomico Shores. So I did include, it was a little bit late, but I did include their latest strategic plan, Parks and Rec strategic plan, which is an annual kind of an update of their 5-year. So that their land preservation, parks and recreation plan is a 5-year plan, and every year they come through and they do an update. So that was included in your board docs materials today. But I just kind of wanted to go through that. They sent over a couple slides, and I'll just go through them quickly. I'm certainly not the expert in the Recreation and Parks Plan, but what is the plan? And you have this in your materials also. It serves as two functions. It's a comprehensive master planning document for the department in terms of where they're going to go, what their objectives, basically a strategic plan. And it also is needed for Maryland's program, Open Space Program. So much of the funding that they get for things like some fields and different parks and stuff comes from program Open Space, the state space, and you need to have LPPRP in order to do that. It establishes goals, recommendations, so it's okay. To guide St. Mary's County, improving kind of what they do, public parks, rec services, and open space. And again, they get input to find what people are looking for. And if you look through this plan that I included in your materials, they actually go at the end of it, they go through each goal and have what the specific recommendations are and what the actions items are. And they went through and crossed off the ones that they already completed. So you'll see most of these are strike-throughs that says complete in fiscal year 21 or whatever it is. So they've done a good job, and this plan explains that. Next slide. And again, like any strategic plan, it's got some standard sections, mission, goals, objectives. The recreation leisure trend analysis, that's a little different, specific to their specific plan. Needs assessment, inventory, level of service standards. So, they get a lot of input from people saying, what do you think we need? And then they take action on that. So I remember last time there was a great need for all-weather fields, turf fields they call them, synthetic fields. And they went out and I think they had 3 beautiful synthetic turf fields built. So they checked that off their list. And so they do listen very, very closely to what the public's looking for. And just go back, sorry, one more. There. And there's an ag and natural resources section, which we actually, our agriculture and division writes that with them. So we actually, that has to do with more land preservation in terms of the open space that we do for land preservation efforts. Next slide. So there are 3 ways to give input and guide the next 5 years. Community survey. You can pre-register for a focus group, and you can attend a public open house, which they have one tonight. And then there's also a slide I think I included. I don't know if you can pull that up, Destiny. And this is in your packet too. This is just a little more specific. The Survey Monkey, like Bill mentioned, they're doing the Survey Monkey. And here's some upcoming focus group meetings. October 26th, 27th, and 28th. Also public forum, October 28th, back at Wacomico Shores. And Christina Bishop is the project manager for that, and she's obviously in Parks and Rec. So take a look at that and participate in that if you can. And that's all I have for that.
Okay, next item on the list is the SEDS work group updates. And let's see, Tristan Marino is the co-chair of the Economic Resilience Subcommittee. I am the co-chair of the Document Review Committee, and Christine Bergmark and Dale Moore are the co-chairs for the new initiatives. So whichever one of you would like to take a stab at it first.
I'm going to start with new initiatives.
Yep.
Okay, very good.
Why not?
Okay. So in spite of our best efforts, it was hard to get our group together in the 2 months that we had. And so Dale and I and Catherine Stormont had a number of talks, sort of brainstorming through things. And so what we'll present to you very briefly tonight is sort of high level what our thinking was, recognizing that it's our thinking, not necessarily the whole committee at this point in time. What our hope is to bring some of these ideas forward and then to turn it over to the consultant and as a whole, EDC to stay engaged with the process. So at the highest of high levels, we talked about, first of all, the need for sort of a vision and a mission statement and where we're going. I will say that we, Dale and I, sort of felt a little bit like we were a little out of sync because you guys were doing the document review, so we didn't have the advantage of having all the updated review, updated material and the resiliency plan, which I think had we had more time, it would have been nice to have that sequence. But anyway, so thinking about the need for a vision and a mission statement, where do we want the county to be? What do we want it to look like, and what do we want it to be in terms of providing a business-friendly environment and a quality of life attractiveness for our citizens? So we identified the need for a business-friendly climate that would entice more businesses to operate in the county. And how can the Department of Economic Development address the permitting barriers that were mentioned earlier and some of the regulatory processes, and indeed all the barriers to businesses becoming established and staying established in our county. Identified workforce, the need for the nature of work, what's happening right now with workforce as the pandemic has changed the way that we work. We've got hybrid, we've got in-person, we've got virtual, and what does that look like for our region and for our businesses? Talked about land preservation and how we might be able to better activate the use of some of that land, not just with the wonderful work that the Ag Commission is doing, the Ag and Seafood Board, in targeting specific commodities, but also looking at things like greenway trails or mountain bike trails, or are there other things that we could be doing with some of that preserved land? 1, 2, 3. Fourth is transportation. This is everywhere we go, cited as a hindrance. It's hard because we're a peninsula. So why not start looking at some of our manned or unmanned or unwomaned drones to move people around? We know the airport is expanding. What's that going to look like? Can we get in bigger planes? Can we get in commuter planes? What impact would a ferry service have in our region? And then finally, we talked about arts and entertainment, and that being so important in every meeting we go to for the quality of life, not just of our citizens, but also to attract outsiders, recognizing that tourism is our second largest industry in the county. So the need for a more greater emphasis on that. I'll quickly turn to Dale for some more deep dive, and there we go.
I'll pull my charts up.
Oh, sorry, on business friendly, of course, broadband, and that was mentioned earlier too, but the need for expanded access to broadband across all the businesses and all the households in the county.
Right. Okay, great. Go ahead and go to the second chart, please. It's back. All right, as Christine talked, we're really thinking about, this says, what do we want to be when we grow up? Makes an assumption that we want change, and we're going to have to evolve in the context of the world around us. So it's a great visioning exercise because we have so many natural resources, so many possibilities, and there's a lot going on in the world that we can take advantage of. This is just a list that we came up with to describe the kinds of things that this county can become and be as descriptors. So when people think of branding and perceptions, these are the kind of words we would love for them to come forward with. Work-life balance, energetic, thriving, collaborative, connected, learning. All these words, I think, really kind of evoke an image, a vision of where we'd like to go into the future compared to today. Many of these do apply today. Anyway, be open to any ideas people have along these lines. Next chart. So U.S. News & World Reports just came out with their 2021 list of best places to live in the U.S., and my question is, Why isn't it St. Mary's County? I just got back from 2 weeks in Colorado. I visited Boulder. Very vibrant activity. You know, the University of Colorado flagship university is co-located there. They have a beautiful area called Pratt Street where all the visitors come and they go to restaurants and coffee shops and stores, and it's just a great place for the kind of innovation collisions that occur and dialogues. I went to a restaurant, and next thing you know, 3 people sat down next to me and were making business deals on a startup. I mean, just out of nowhere. And so anyway, just to give you some idea, and the question becomes, you know, what do we need to do to be a best place to live, recognized as such? Next chart. There's a website, it's called livability.com, and they have a number of criteria that they, you know, examine different areas about livability. And along here, along the left side, you see different categories. This is just an example. I just kind of threw it together. But, you know, 1 to 10 kind of thing, how we would rate amenities, the demographics that we currently have compared to where we want to be, economy, education, healthcare, housing, social and civic capital, transportation, and infrastructure. And these certainly aren't all the categories, but it's nice to think about the as is today and the to be that we want to get to as part of that vision that Christine talked about that we want to go to in the future. Next chart. So some of the discussion topics we just want to throw out there as seeds of thought to get the discussion going that can help us to consider where we want to go into the future. Next chart. So as I socialize this, Leslie Taylor, Vice Commander NavAir, former Executive Director of NALC-AD, actually brought up machine learning and AI. There is a global phenomena that's occurring right now. I don't know that we're fully aware of all that, but the sense of urgency in this space is pretty critical. And so we've kind of described it, and this is for the consultant to pick up and run with. But the idea is to research and benchmark critical applications where it makes good sense to apply it and develop an infrastructure and training plan, et cetera, that would fit in with the other plans that we have within the county. Next chart. There's a lot going on around the world in smart cities, a whole lot, by the way. Well, no one's really talking about smart counties. And I think we have an opportunity to leverage digital infrastructure, broadband, these kinds of things for the betterment of the county. So to think through how and where that would apply, and there's, I sent out a note yesterday, there's a White House initiative, Metro Network, I think it's called, where, you know, universities are partnering with cities. A colleague of mine from Atlanta was on the mayor's staff, and they were engaged in this. So Georgia Tech is directly helping the city of Atlanta to become a smart city. And these are being benchmarked around the world. I think Helsinki is probably number 1 in the world in this space, but you know, we're not really aware of this, and it's something for us to think about and consider. Next chart. Esports is a growing area. You can turn on the TV and you'll see drone racing. This is large scale. It's very cool. It is publicized. It's fun. It's something I think would really take it to the next level for our youth and get them familiar and comfortable with electronics, with aerodynamics, with the competitiveness to try to outthink each other and all that. So, and it would also bring some notoriety to the region. So something to consider going forward. I think it's a STEM-related thing, but it's also creativity. There's all sorts of spin-outs that we could get in this space and business models to consider. And there is a professional league associated with all this that major cities are embracing. So they do this inside stadiums, by the way. And it's just, it's really, really neat. Next chart. And oh, by the way, the drones go about 90 miles an hour. And they're wearing VR goggles, and they've got the cameras, and in real time they're racing each other. 3D immersive visualization, this is really interesting. We actually prototyped this out in town in 2012 at NALC-AD when I ran the strategic cell. And we had avatars. There's a couple pictures down there at the bottom that kind of show you. So it's a lot less expensive to build virtual 3D space than actual real 3D space. But the beauty of it is you can collaborate 24/7, 365 with avatars in a 3D space. It's very experiential, and you can interface digital tools that we're all using for analysis and modeling and simulation with these kinds of environments. And NVIDIA and Facebook are now recognizing that 3D virtual space is a next natural evolution of their platforms. NVIDIA has a platform called Omniverse and Metaverse that is taking off like light speed. So this is like forewarning. This has been around for a while. I actually had a dialogue with the Chief of Naval Research saying that this would take everything to the next level in terms of our product development. So expect more along these lines. Next chart. 3 additive manufacturing. We're just at the very beginning of this. This has just started. It started with plastics. It's now metals, and now it's hybrids and composite materials. So all of a sudden, you've got this ability to create structures in manufacturing that you couldn't create with regular machine tools. The shapes are mimicking biological designs, and it's clean. And so the flexibility is amazing. MITRE has, just as one example, created an AESA radar about this big that was printed with metals and polymers that you could now put on an unmanned vehicle as one of their developmental, just as one example, but there's many out there. And there's actually a company I've been talking to in north of Baltimore that's actually building the equipment for all this. Next chart. Software development, we tend to have a hardware orientation in how we think about things, but the quote is software's eating the world. So the question would be, where are we with software development? It's an extraordinarily complex and area, but it basically is driving the future in terms of everything that we're doing. So mastering software and everything about software, the hardware is going to come. It's absolutely going to come, and that's still moving out like crazy, even though we have the chip problem. Anyway, so what are we doing in software? It's just, you can't see it, you can't really touch it, you can do with it on the computer, but you can see its effects everywhere. Algorithmic warfare is really where things are going, and you can imagine that in a competitiveness economic environment as well. Next chart. Digital transformation. It's, we think in analog terms. We have, all of our senses that we use, but you can capture that. You can take the data, you can analyze it, you can integrate it, you can better understand things that you didn't understand at this stage of the game. Everyone's moving in this direction. So capturing data, leveraging data, using data to help out with our plans, to help inform human decision making is moving out like light speed. Next chart. Regional collaboration models and tools. There's a lot of fragmentation all over the state, the nation, everywhere you look. So understanding the networks, the topology, the interconnections, how they can be energized, synergized, is really interesting and enabling. And with information technology, there's ways you can really promote that. Certainly face-to-face communications builds mutual trust and respect, and we need to promote that. But once you have that in place, it's wide open. And what we find is in the research community that researchers are normally collaborating all over the world. In very deep specialty areas, it's not unusual to have 2 or 3 names on patents from different countries. So anyway, I think that's something that we can really take advantage of where we have a lot of fragmentation today. Next chart. We have an innovation district, and Chris, you got huge kudos here for all that you've done there. And that's really an academic focus in terms of the research piece of it. Realize that in 1995, and I was one of the first people to break down from headquarters, and we moved Warminster down, and we lost about 2/3 of our researchers, and we haven't recovered ever since. But research is the feedstock for innovation. And when you think about a place like Research Triangle in North Carolina, they are professional researchers. They're not students. These are like, no kidding, who's inventing Moderna, right? Vaccines and, all the different things. So thinking in terms of research as an emphasis area, because it's not really an emphasis area that we see much of in many places. I'll just kind of leave it at that. But leveraging those research networks, doing this research work, and feeding that into innovation and product development and delivery to customers is kind of the pathway to competitiveness in the future. Next chart. I think that might be it.
Yeah, that's the last slide.
Is that it? Okay. Yeah, that's all I had.
Thank you.
Great.
Good stuff.
Okay, so for the document review committee, we did only get the opportunity to meet 2, maybe 3 times. During those meetings, we were able to cover the introduction to the SEDS, Chapter 1, the factors influencing economic development, Chapter 2, agriculture and aquaculture, as well as Chapter 3, which is the tourism and hospitality master plan. In the course of that, we kind of identified right off the bat that the areas that definitely need more attention within the current SEDS are, of course, ag and aqua, with particular attention to aquaculture. As Dale mentioned, the possibilities for additive manufacturing, that was one of the topics or the possibilities that was included in the SEDS that hasn't really gotten the attention that I think St. Mary's County could be poised to give it, especially with the new Aero Park. Expanding the research again in the Aero Park, now that we have Building 3 open, that area is ripe to explode with it. And clarifying the importance of encouraging homegrown innovation and tech rather than going out there and, sort of going to outside environments, outside locations, and hunting those companies, even if they're startups, to really encourage the talent that we have already, the sort of pluck from things like Airworks, Techport, wherever the incubators or pseudo-incubators are in the county, and really encourage that growth. And it'll do more than just, the obvious of improving innovation, but it will be yet another company that sets up roots here and won't be leaving anytime soon for, the next best town that comes along, that they will stay here for the long term. They will increase the likelihood of long-term sustainability and success. As to rewind a bit as far as the intro, Destiny had been working on bringing all of the metrics identified, especially in the intro and throughout the SEDS, up to date with the new 2020 census numbers. So hopefully that's coming along well. The really interesting meeting was when we got to chapters 2 and 3, the agriculture and aquaculture, and later on we were fortunate enough, or later on in the meeting, we were fortunate enough to be able to bring in the Ag and Seafood and Forestry Division representative, and the amount of knowledge and current state of those 2 industries in the county that we got was invaluable, and such a tremendous insight into where we are right now and the current goals that we have and where we can go. One of the things that was highlighted was, given the amount of critical area in St. Mary's County, especially the areas that are, given climate change, are extra vulnerable to flooding, to erosion, to any number of things. How do we address that now and prepare for it now, while expanding the economy, while placing an increased emphasis on aquaculture and the farms that are down in South County, are down off of Budds Creek Road in Chapticot? We saw just a few years ago the devastation that flooding created just from one event, one isolated event. It wasn't even a hurricane. Profitability of current crops, that given that it's decreased markedly since tobacco was sort of the king crop in St. Mary's County, that ever since 2002, there's been, yes, over the long term, farms have remained relatively, or the number of farms has remained relatively stable, fluctuating a bit from year to year, but that they still have not identified a crop that has yielded the profit margin that tobacco has, especially when it comes to the amount of work required to to harvest the current crops. We brought up the topic of land use and TDRs, and is that system practical and working the way it's currently set up? And this was something that I found rather interesting. Between the time that the SEDS was first developed and when they were looking at that, and now the vast majority of reclaimed agricultural land has gone to low-density housing, with virtually none of it going to medium or high density. So you've got all these subdivisions of single-family homes that have been created, but the number of apartments or the number of townhomes has not kept pace with that. Excuse me. Again, highlighted the, oh, excuse me, I need to take a drink of water. The lack of priority on aquaculture. And Gerald, I'm sorry, you may have to take over from here. I seem to be coughing a lot, so if you could. Yeah. I only have so much voice to go around.
Drink some more water.
I hate to see you coughing like that. Where do you want me to sit?
Just sit right here.
Sit right here.
Oh, you right here, I have the notes
All
on.
right.
Sorry about that.
Bear with me, I'm reading someone else's notes. As I start choking up. Where were we? Aquaculture, right? So aquaculture was emphasized in the sets before. The situational analysis and recommendations were captured by Jamie Raley during the SEDS development, now an appendix to SEDS. Concerns over long-term viability was expressed by the community. In agriculture, obviously you have the rural legacy preservation areas, the medium and high density residential housing, which we talked about, and due to lack of TDRs is?
Technical development rights, I believe.
Transferable development
Transferable,
rights.
yes.
Yeah, the current zoning code and costs of TDRs, of course, the price has increased, them and isn't sustainable or supportable. Industrial zoning, request for status of agriculture and aquaculture, recommendations for SEDS. Tourism and hospitality master plan highlights, this is basically a listing of everything that has to be included there, right? Highlights and promote the North County Farmers Market expansion, create opportunities for more outdoor concerts, venues, and promote existing ones. More opportunities for cycling, to go mountain, off-road biking, etc. There, I should add, from a discussion that we had, I think already 2 years ago or a year and a half ago, about the possibility of using the old right-of-way, which runs all the way down to Point Lookout, and has been done in the northern portion of the county, but does not seem to have extended as far down as, beyond the base, basically.
Okay. I think my voice may have recovered.
You may, okay.
Thank
all
you
right.
for that. Sorry about the...
I think it's related to sitting here because my voice is not really? Right? Yeah.
Interesting. Maybe the air is drier over here.
What's going on over there?
Okay, so for the Ag, Seafood, and Forestry Board update that we had, they provided some data from the 2017 agriculture profile for the county census. Now, they did remind us to take it with a grain of salt, considering that the responses were voluntary. But the number of farms is down 3% from 2012. However, there is an increase in the number of farms between 1 and 9 acres, which is somewhat interesting. Currently only 2 certified organic farms in the county, and this is a big but, there are others practicing organic methods, they just haven't been certified. They highlighted the unique farming community in St. Mary's County, traditional farming as well as Amish and Mennonite. the 3 farmers markets in the county, North County, the one at BAE, and the homegrown market just south of Gate 3. So the recommendations that we were able to draw from that for the SEDS were the adoption of more digital technology. COVID forced a lot of farmers, especially those that participate in the farmers markets, to go cashless simply because of the contact issue and rely more on that rather than, or rely more on credit card point of sales rather than cash. But enough have reverted back to their previous, less digitalized system since the peak of COVID. So a system that could benefit overall is waning and needs to be, the reintroduction of it, or readoption of it rather, needs to be encouraged. There is a new effort among the future of farming in the county and young farmer type initiatives. And there is actually a young farmers group taking up, or a young farmers group that's been recently established, and sort of the next generation taking up the wheel for farming in the county. One of the interesting things is that they really identified the future of farming in retail, agritourism, farmers markets, that sort of thing, rather than in wholesale, which would sort of be the equivalent of sending grain over to the Eastern Shore for Purdue and the chicken farms over there. And they stress the importance of, the importance of balancing agriculture and aquaculture in general in the county, and the emphasis on, hey, we need more farmers, period. We need grain farmers, we need commodity farmers to support the potential output that the county has and has since waned in the last few decades. There was discussion of bringing a barge in for the grain that kind of faded in and out, considering that they're even just having trouble keeping up with the grain elevator. I believe it is in the northern area of the state. And again, encouraging farmers to keep raising crops, encouraging them to, encouraging the county as a whole to purchase from local and regional food producers rather than, even down to the grocery stores, rather than going outside the county and outside the state. They are attempting to get the cottage food revenue limit raised to $40,000 from $25,000. I know that was an area that John had kind of been leading. And further discussion of that the barns in the new North County market will be a major asset to the county. I believe, Curtis, you were discussing the possibility of further down the road even adding on to restaurants around the shops, so it could be a almost direct farm to table concept. Also discussion of alternative crops, and ultimate conclusion that there's no magic bullet to being able to replicate the success that tobacco had down here, both just in terms of growing and in terms of the financial and economic rewards that it reaped. But there are a variety of commodities and crops that can be used to try and mitigate the loss. And then even going on to tourism and hospitality master plans, and I will try to sum this up as quickly as possible. primary goal for the new director is to make the area a premier weekend destination for the Mid-Atlantic region and the most attractive tourism destination in the capital region, which I think is well within reach. Priorities were overall increase in engagement and training for the partners, stakeholders, and tourism and hospitality workers. Again, highlighted the agriculture sustainability for small farms lies in agritourism and really pushing that effort. In the same vein, going green, ecotourism, eco-villages, the possibility of walking the farm, which would essentially create public walking trails on/across farmlands. Farmers market, capture potential for Airbnb. I think at last count, there were roughly 150 to 200 listings down here, and that was at any given point, but that the potential for it is significantly more if we can capture that market well, especially in the areas that have waterfront access. And the we again went over the progress on streamlining business processes in the last few years and the important role that Pier 450 played in sort of a live trial of the county's strengths and weaknesses when it comes to that. And creating, as Bill mentioned earlier, creating a closer relationship with land use and growth management to foster that. So that about sums it up.
I think you have one more committee, the Economic Resilience Committee.
Yes.
Well, they really saved the best for last. Don't blink. But very nice, Elizabeth. Our economic resilience sessions, we were able to meet about 3 times, I think. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend the last one, but I do have the notes from our major disruptors working session, just highlighting Lisa, John, and Elizabeth, and Brooke, who isn't here tonight, but they all were able to discuss the disruptors that we highlighted, and give a overview. And so this is the overview of Brooke's food supply disruption. Elizabeth highlighted the warning tools and economic indicators for geographic vulnerabilities. John highlighted cyber attacks and how they've occurred in the area, in Baltimore even, in North Beach. And Lisa actually highlighted sequestration. I didn't know if any of you wanted to touch into any of that.
I'll give a quick brief on cyber attacks.
All right.
So this past summer in July, the town of Leonardtown and also North Beach over in Calvert County were victims of a ransomware attack. It's specifically for Leonardtown. It resulted in a loss of service to computers, and the impact was quarterly bills were delayed, and customers were unable to access their online utility bills. The ransomware, they demanded $45,000 per computer to allow access to the computer and to the information. And the town of Leonardtown was able to restore the computers. It took some time, but they were able to restore the computers to some backups. How this relates to what we're doing here is when we start to think about resiliency and how we should build systems within the county. So CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, has a ton of free resources on their website. Specifically, they have a section on cyber hygiene, which is just ways that you can reduce the risk of successful cyber attacks. And they also have some cyber attack assessment and evaluation tools on there. And it's a free resource that, as a county, we can go on and utilize those tools. But when we're thinking about building our systems, something that's kind of counterintuitive to moving forward is both redundancy and segmentation. So redundancy, having backups to our systems, right? So we store a lot of information on servers. So can we think of ways that we can air gap that server to where that server is not connected online to the internet? So that will one way to reduce cyber attacks and successful cyber attacks. And then also segmentation. When we think about having, the thought process is let's have systems and have all the systems talk together. Well, when you do that, there's a threat and there's the possibility if all the systems are talking together, if you can get in one system, then you've got in all systems. So it's kind of counterintuitive to think that way, but as far as cybersecurity, it's one of the best ways to protect yourself is to have, you don't want to use the same password for all of you, everything that you have, right? If you use the same password for everything you have, once one person gets that one password, they can get into all your systems. So it's kind of that same concept of, can we utilize different IT companies or can we utilize different software? So if one company, so in Leonardtown's case, they contracted with a company called Just Tech, and Just Tech used a company, I believe, Kaseya. And so Kaseya, the company Kaseya was attacked, and once they got into that system, I think 90% of their clients had problems. So when we started to think about our systems and how we are interacting with the public, do we really want to just use one company? Because there's that, once again, that threat if that one company is attacked and then all of our systems are runnable. Can we possibly utilize multiple companies so that way we're going to minimize any impact that we have if we are attacked again? And that's about all I have.
Thank you, John.
Yep, no problem.
Lisa, Elizabeth, it's okay. I'm putting you on the spot if you had anything to discuss, but if not, I can just carry on. Take us home.
Sure.
Okay.
Well, I'll just summarize quickly. Sequestration, still pretty raw for all of us. It wasn't too long ago that we had to live through it, and of course, it impacted every level of residents, businesses, food safety, and right here on base, big impact financially to the area. So I do have 12 slides. I don't think you need to see them. They're all full of lots of numbers and words and everything, but if you'd like me to share them with you through email, I'd be glad to do that.
That'd be great, yeah. Send them to us and we'll send them around.
Okay. Did you want to add anything?
I don't really want to bore the commission with another long-winded speech about economic indicators and jobs reports and all that good stuff.
Well,
Yeah.
understood. Yeah.
I have a question. This may go back to you, John. I'm not sure, but as far as like cyber attacks and whatnot, the loss to a business, the rent revenue, and this sort of thing, is this something that insurance companies are insuring companies now for cyber attacks or things like this, or basically, if you get hit, it's just a total loss for that business?
So,
does anybody know?
So nationally, yes. So I can think of some national attacks where the perpetrator asks for the exact amount of the insurance policy, right? So they figured out what the insurance policy is. If it's a $100 million insurance policy, my cyber attack, I'm going to ask you for $100 million because I know you can get that from your insurance, from your So yes, I think it's something that can be insured, but I also think it's something that all businesses don't want to do because then you become a target, right? If a company knows that, if a potential somebody knows that that's how much they can get from you, then that's what
Makes you more vulnerable.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Good question.
So a lot of businesses are moving to the cloud, and the cloud gives a lot of security protection generally, not so much on the computer you have, but for your data and the backups and all that. When you outsource to the cloud, it's expandable, contraction. So I know a lot of small businesses are using the cloud.
Awesome. Well, the goal, all in all, was to narrow down the major disruptors in the area. So we, have those briefs and would hope, we're going to be meeting probably
I think November.
once or twice, before the end of the year at least. And then we would have more narrowed down for those disruptors, and we'd offer up the briefs to the consultant, obviously. And so, that concludes. I'm wearing my pink today in recognition of Breast Cancer Awareness Month, so there's that.
Okay.
Okay, and I would like...
Christine, huh?
Oh, yes, sorry.
Just making a comment, I'm really struck by the convergence of all three committees or groups in a couple of areas. I noted, Dale, you talked about, the increased manufacturing and you referenced that in terms of aquaculture. We all talked about, in different ways, but access to digital resources. You mentioned farmers who shifted over to using more digital resources. Dale, you talked about smart counties and we all are aware of smart homes, but we all need internet to be able to reach those and to reach all the cloud and all those things. You talked about about the hacker, and how that has impacted our economy. And I was struck by two of our groups talked about tourism and how we can use some of that preserved land for things like trails or mountain bikes, other things like that. And in resiliency, tying into flooded lands and the impact on our infrastructure that way, the roadways. Then also, you mentioned in terms of farming, there are actual things that could replace tobacco. It's a question of whether or not in the state of Maryland you can grow them, medical marijuana being one, where we are hampered in our state. I just came back from a week in Washington, the state of Washington, where things operate in a very, very different way. But there are things, if we can open our minds to think about how we could produce them in a way that is safe for all of us.
Are they scalable to the same degree that tobacco was? Because before the tobacco buyout program went into effect, virtually every single farm that you came across was, I think, probably at least 50% of the crop was tobacco. It was pervasive down here,
Yes,
almost. And the replicating, not only the profit margin per farm, but overall within the agriculture sector is what's proving to be the challenge. So if, by any means, if that's scalable to the same degree or up to the same degree that tobacco was, then, it would just be a question of if it's legal in Maryland and if all the boxes are checked.
Well, and to Christine's point, hemp has been shown to be a big potential crop. It's just about the legalization issue, right?
And is it right for the area?
Yeah.
In terms of the growing climate?
And it is allowed in the state, but there's very limited licenses. Right?
And very expensive to get the licenses, yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah, very, very regulated at the moment.
Right.
Mm-hmm. You're right.
Kind of giving a mixed signal whether we want it or not, I guess.
So I had a couple comments. Is that good discussion time?
Yeah, I think we can officially open the floor for open discussion.
So I wanted to resonate on something you brought up, which was the climate change and flooding. If you just look at this picture and the 400 miles of coastline, and if you accept that climate change is real, I live on the water, it's a real concern. And we probably ought to have a serious hard look at that, because that's going to affect a whole lot of stuff, and there may be remediation efforts we can put in place today that protect us in the future. And so I want to bring that up. I forgot to mention major NASA effort in urban air mobility. This takes, unmanned quadcopters to a whole nother level. They have a NASA-wide initiative in this. It's around the country, and given our emphasis with the new airport area, the runway and all that, I just think that we are well poised. Rural suburbs are much more amenable than cities to this kind of thing. So as a first mover advantage, I think we're really well positioned. There's over 100 companies working on these systems. Air Force AFWorks is funding a bunch of them. They have a whole initiative in that space. So I'm just saying this stuff is going on, and I can just imagine 3D printing starting manufacturing of a quadcopter for human taxis, and being able to go and as wherever you want. And then that gets into a more pragmatic, just a question, I don't know the answer to this, is have we looked at ferries over to the different shores? Because right now, it's really difficult to, and my sister-in-law lives in Vashon Island in Washington and by Seattle, and they run ferries all the time. And it really connects everything. They've got a drumbeat, it's a regular cycle, and, just imagine the possibilities of being able to offer that option to everyone. I think it'd be a game changer in a huge way. Now, whether you want that or not, I don't know. That's another question, because that opens up a lot of things very, very rapidly. The other thing, and I've been stressing this with the people at Pax River, talking to their strategic education office, we're in a serious war for talent. This is a war. And so everything we're doing here to build this work-life balance, quality of life, the reputation, perception, all these things, to get the kind of people we need to do, we're up against tremendous competition, right? Amazon's now looking up to hire 100,000 people. I mean, these companies have deep pockets. The government doesn't. They're cutting salaries, they're cutting headcount. In my opinion, I think they need to relook at all that. But it's a war for talent, and that talent has to have the skills that can add value into the future. I wanted to resonate on the organic farming. I think that with green kind of orientation and farm to table, I did farm to table out in Colorado, and it was fantastic. And I think from a reputational perspective, a perception perspective, emphasizing organic, farm to table, that whole kind of thing, I think would really be a great thing to kind of wave a flag on, my opinion. I took a shot at looking at the tourism website. Absolutely first class. I thought it was outstanding. I was now looking for, where's the economic development equivalent to that, right? To entice these companies to come down here to tell the story about what the possibilities are. So I would get the same company to put the same kind of thing together to build that excitement, because, it's how you're perceived and the branding for the area. So I think that's...
Just in defense, I think we have a pretty good website. If you've been to our Yes St. Mary's MD, have you been there?
I know we have the book, and I haven't checked it out. I'm just saying, I'll take a look at it, I promise.
Okay. I don't want to leave that one hanging there.
I was taken aback by how good the tourism was.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, I live right there, so that's pretty awesome.
Yeah. There we go.
So just bring that up. That's what I had.
Logan. There you go.
Actually, to piggyback off of the comment, yes. Okay. We had it up. To piggyback off the comment that you made about climate change, and Tristan, this actually interfaces with the geographic vulnerabilities that I covered. Route 5 is if climate change becomes more of a problem, if we get bigger storms, if we get more flooding, Route 5 is, and the roads off of it, Newtown Neck, Budds Creek Road, are a serious liability. There is flood prone, and massively so, in multiple spots essentially along the entire stretch from, I would say, Forest Hall Farm all the way down to Point Lookout. You're not even looking at the areas of vulnerability in South County, Newtown Neck Road, the Leonardtown Business District that sits right there, especially the buildings right next to McIntosh Run, have been flooded multiple times just over the past 10 years. Breton Bay is at risk. The conference center down there, I think in it, Brooms Howard, or the other one that doesn't come to mind right now. But that entire area, essentially the business district and down Newtown Neck, Budds Creek Road, the area at Chaptico Road, and the roundabout that I discussed that was flooded a few years ago, and I think took several weeks to finally dry out. And that corridor really is where most of the aquaculture in the county comes from. It's where most of a lot of the farms and agriculture comes from. So if that gets flooded out, you're looking at, beyond just transportation problems getting the product to market, farmers not being able to recover from short-term to long-term, whether it's because, their crops were ruined just before harvesting and, a hurricane came along and completely, wind destroyed them, or God forbid, they just planted the seeds and a flood happened again and washed out that really entire year of profits and revenue for them. So it's, to say it is a linchpin in, or it's sort of a worst case scenario worst case scenario linchpin in the success of the county and in the economic development of the county is, I don't think it would be an understatement. And Phil, if you want to add anything to that from your experience of what you've seen over the years. I'm not sure if, I missed certain areas or I misspoke.
Climate change, sea level rise is what you're talking about, yeah. And actually, I can speak to that a little bit, but, and things are certainly changing, and I'm seeing it in a natural resource with southern species moving farther and farther north. Our climate right now, I mean, just until recently, we didn't need jackets, and we're almost at the end of October, so it's real, whether you accept the fact or not, but it is certainly a big difference from being from the county and growing up here as a kid in the climate. There's a major change that we've experienced over the years. Some disadvantages, certainly the climate change, is freshets, tropical depressions and whatnot, if we get more of them. You were talking about agriculture and aquaculture, but even the natural oysters in the Potomac River, the Chesapeake Bay, if you get above the 301 bridge, going into Virginia, or you get above Baltimore, there is a ton of shell in those areas, but there are no live animals, no live oysters in these areas. And at one time, the shell is there because there used to be live animals there. But I think oysters don't survive in fresh water. And if you get below like 5 parts per thousand salinity, they don't do very well. And when you get above these bridges now, it's almost at zero. And I contribute a lot of it, unfortunately, to at one time all of our major cities and whatnot, they were all developed on the coastlines and around the shorelines. And at one time you had buffers that were the water, instead of all the runoff, the stormwater drains, everything going into the estuaries, used to allow it to filter through the soils and whatnot. But I think you've got so much fresh water now that enters the estuaries through runoff that I'm not sure you'll ever see oysters or natural oysters, wild oysters come back, or even farm raised. You can't grow farm raised oysters in low salinity conditions either. That's why this area, as far as aquaculture, St. Mary's County is an ideal location, or the eastern shore, or the lower half of the bay, because our salinity levels are to the point that we're more isolated from freshets. If you get within 10 to 20 miles of the bridge, if you have a tropical depression, it can kill all the oysters because of so much fresh water. Where, I'm not saying that, there's a saying like, here at Pax River, we're recession-proof. We're not really recession-proof because, we are subject to the same factors that everybody else is. But at the same time, the oysters aren't protected totally from freshets, but in this part of the county and southern Maryland area, it's a much better location than it would be in a lot of other areas. So there is opportunity there.
Okay, good.
Good.
but it's become a much more delicate balance to maintain that level of salinity, it sounds like, than it had been in years past, that we risk that number dropping even more and
Oh,
the
yeah,
oysters
absolutely.
going
Yep.
away.
Yeah.
I did have a kind of a question. You mentioned runoff in the cities and all that, how it's affecting the salinity in the water. I'd heard someone say once that like all the developments we're having built around the county are displacing where water would typically go and absorb into the soil, and therefore running off at a greater volume than it did historically, which is causing some of these flooding issues we're seeing, like in Brenton Bay and other places we had discussed. And I'm wondering, that's probably more of a land use and management sort of question or scope there, but I'm wondering, has there been any consideration regarding that and how to curb that impact and lessen the flooding?
It's kind of a two-sided sword, isn't it? Because there's the increased number of housing developments, but there's also the increased intensity of storms that we're seeing.
Right.
Like you say, whether or not you call it climate change, but we're definitely seeing that. And so greater runoff because of more asphalt and intense storms with much more rainfall in a very short amount of time. So yeah, it's a good question. And to your point, Phil, that we think about buffers around our beautiful waterways is really germane to, I think, the future of our fishing and our seafood industry.
And the state does have pretty strict regulations in the critical area, so you get 1,000 feet around, our 500 miles of shoreline, and you can't cover up the ground without, you have to make sure water can get through and everything. So the argument for some is that it's too strict, so you try to strike a balance, but the state is aware. I don't know, I think the magnitude, like Phil's talking about, is, especially up in the bigger cities, they don't have the ability to do what we can do down here. I think maybe sometimes the regulations seem like they're stricter on us than in some of the urban areas of kind of
Yeah, and this is something that's been done over hundreds of years now.
Right.
As far as the development and in the major cities and the impervious surface and the concrete and asphalts and whatnot, and it has impacted our natural resources, but the good thing is we're aware of it. We know it now, and we plan for it as we move forward.
I mean, you could go, if you go down to like historic St. Mary's City and you go in the parking lot and the surface is pervious, it's not a solid surface. That's so the water can get through. But if you go up to Target, it's impervious, right? Do we want to have impervious everywhere? I mean, you probably wouldn't get very far with a proposal like that, but
That
Sounds like a deal with Target you could make, right? I mean, seriously, I mean, that's a good point, right? I mean, if you want to build something, then you have to do this.
The enforcement of the critical area raises a question. So I live right down by Gate 3, and I can say with absolute certainty that there is a set of townhomes and a parking lot a large set of townhomes and a parking lot right next to it, and the bay is directly on the other side of the townhomes, and it's maybe 500 feet from the dunes of the bay to where the parking lot starts. It may even be less than that. It may be closer to 200 or 300 feet.
Well,
But my question would be, how strictly is that critical area amount being adhered to? And what loopholes exist that developers would see and say, I can take advantage of that, or, I don't really have to apply or adhere by the 1,000 feet requirement?
Yeah, I'm not an expert in the critical area. I don't know if any other people are here, but it is pretty strict here. I mean, they do enforce it. They'll cite people. They'll even, you can get reports of people cutting down trees within the critical area, and they'll be out there and they'll fine people. I mean, so they're kind of on it, especially now with satellite images and all this other kind of stuff. They know what's happening. So the state is very strict. I don't know that developers can just get around it. I mean, I think that's one of the complaints we hear more on the other side from economic development is, why can't I do this? I want to, we talked about a waterfront restaurant. Well, there's a lot of hoops you have to jump through if you want to do a waterfront restaurant, and we do see a lot of waterfront restaurants in other places, and, there are, the critical area's got 3 different levels of intensity of what you can build, and there are sometimes you can do mitigation in other places, or if you have a large enough lot, you can have a certain percentage of coverage, so there's maybe in the case you're talking about, maybe it's a large parcel and there's someplace else they're planting trees or something, I don't know, but there's some kind of mitigation you can sometimes do. But, Sue Veith is on our staff, and she's really the county expert on a lot of that stuff, and if you want to have her come in, she can talk more about critical area.
May I add something to this?
Yeah.
Sometime about 2 years ago, there was a major study by the Department of Natural Resources of Maryland, and it looked at the impact of global warming and waters rising, and the impact after the new hurricane that we had about 8 years ago. The study pointed out that a lot of the low-lying areas were wetlands 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 300 years ago, that had been recovered for the purpose of growing tobacco. And that with the losses that were incurred by the state in terms of covering crop losses, etc., that the most likely solution would be to return those areas to wetlands. In other words, for the state to buy them and to simply remove the obstructions that have been built in order to prevent flooding, and to simply turn them back into wetlands, which would have a positive impact in terms of the environment, in terms of fisheries, in terms of crabs, in terms of all kinds of other things. I wasn't around 300 years ago, so I don't really know, exactly where those lands are located. But I was around, when I was born, I'm told, I was around, in a country called the Netherlands, and I was born about 21 feet below sea level, with devastating results, because when I was 9 years old, I lived through a flood that killed 2,300 people. But at the same time, even in that country, they are flooding many of the areas that they had recovered over several hundred years and returning it back to wetlands as buffer zones to absorb sudden floods, as buffer zones to absorb the liquid, the water that is coming down the big rivers. We all saw the big floods in Belgium and Germany, just in the last few months. That was mitigated by the fact that they now had all these buffer zones, that they could simply let the water in, and let it flood. So I think that in looking at land use management, that's certainly an issue that has to be looked at. You certainly don't want to be in a position where you continue to build on land that is going to be very fragile. In terms of global warming and rising of water, certainly you see it in the county. Try to have lunch at Courtney's at high tide. Bring your boots, or don't worry about getting your feet wet. It's fine, but it's simply a fact of life. But that is not something that is new for the world. It's not something that is new for most countries. Spent some time living in Greece and in Albania not so long ago, and looking at the geography, I was told that the level of the Mediterranean has come up 38 feet since Roman times over the last 2,000 years. So that the island of Corfu was part of the mainland at one stage. Now there's 40 feet of water between the mainland and the island of Corfu, etc. People live with it. People move away from the water. Even if they build things in the water, once they get flooded a few times, they tend to move on. So resilience is also in the individual, in the decisions that are made as to where to build and how to build, and what the alternatives are. But in terms of what we're talking about, I would really recommend seeing if you can find that study that was done by DNE and look at that, because they did talk about the county extensively.
Interesting.
Since I'm hassling John, there's a couple of other things. First of all, Dale, I think that was an excellent presentation. It was something that was very, very impressive and extremely well done. I sort of notice in terms of what we've been talking about that we're talking less about the base and less about aviation and less about some of those things than some of the other areas. And of course, that is still coming up, I think, in the final chapters. In terms of, I also noticed in resilience that the last time this whole discussion took place, most of the resilience was about what do we do if the base decides to move somewhere else. And I didn't notice that mentioned this time. Probably because there's been such an investment that perhaps it's becoming irrational to move the base, at least in the medium term that we have to worry about. The other thing that I notice is that we talk about the development of the county largely at the highest level. So we talk about, the technology that is implicit in what you were talking about, your presentation, Dale, in terms of all of the inventions and everything else that is coming along, et cetera. And I asked myself the question, how many of the people who work in these fields are actually born in this county or live in this county? And are any of them who live in this county ever going to work in those fields? And if they don't, then our issue is how to retain, the technical immigrants who come here, and we've talked about that fairly extensively. But what we have not talked about is how can we grow the participation of residents of this county and the youth of this county in these changes that we're talking about. This is one area, someone mentioned the airport. I'm on the airport board. One of the things that came up at the airport board, Chris, and you know more about this than I do, was that recently there was an opportunity for the development of a technical school for aircraft mechanics. Mm-hmm. And this county was one of the counties that was under consideration. Apparently there are only 9 such schools in the eastern United States at this time. They're entry-level jobs basically from people coming out of high school and receiving training, but going into aviation mechanics, which is a rapidly growing field where there are very few people actually available at this stage. So it is a real opportunity for a place such as St. Mary's County that has perhaps weaker high schools, but it certainly would have the ability to have intelligent people becoming aircraft mechanics, which should be an entry-level position going into the aviation industry and the technologies that we're talking about. I was told at the airport board that there was very little interest in the meetings that took place and the people that they met with in pursuing this. And are you aware of it, Chris?
That's not true. So they came by invitation. I can't think of the name of the school, but they did come and do a presentation. There were many stakeholders in the room. The colleges were there and the public school folks there, and it was just an initial presentation of here's what we do, just an introductory. There hasn't been a follow-up at this point, but there was interest. I mean, it was just, again, one way, here's what we do. If you want to do something like this, we're interested. I don't think they would put up a new school without funding from the local area. They would be looking for that probably. But it was very, very high level, just here's what we do, thanks for having us come down, here's who we are. So we only got to that point so far. Yeah, but there is interest.
But I thought it was an interesting opportunity in terms of drawing, our youth into an area that is much closer to the aviation industry and to the things that we're talking about, even if it is an entry level. One of the reasons apparently why they're so keen is because they're losing so many mechanics to the higher up technology the providers, so that it becomes a stepping point. But it may be interesting for us to think about that, and what perhaps we can do to promote that or to at least explore it to a greater extent. Mm-hmm. So that was basically
I agree, George. I was at that meeting. It's the Pittsburgh Aviation Institute, I think it was called, and I thought it was very enlightening. And yes, it provides another opportunity to train our young in something that's needed in the county that supports the naval industry that we've got here. So I thought it was a very exciting possibility.
I think there was one of the questions was, can the kids that come out of that school or the students, can they actually get jobs here? Do they need another level of experience or certification? I think there's maybe a little bit of a disconnect. There are jobs certainly for kids that can graduate out of that school, but maybe not as many as you would think because we're an aviation place. Because I think the base and other places need something besides just what they can get from those schools. But still, I think there was an interest.
Yeah.
I mean, you were there, so it seemed like there was a high interest. There's also Dr. Murphy was there from CSM who said that if there is a need, we want an opportunity to fill that need too. So she felt like that's something that CSM could maybe take on.
Okay.
I used to run the Becker Materials Lab, and we had a number of technicians, and they were the most ingenious people, hands-on, coming up with, all sorts of new things. I mean, it was mind-blowing what they were capable of doing, and we don't emphasize that piece of it. And I think, the creative end of it is, if you want innovation, right, you need hands-on kind of experience. We have the prototype facility now on the base. So, we're doing all sorts of stuff hands-on. So, anyway, I just threw that out.
Right. Good. Thank you.
And I just wanted to comment as well that a lot of these things that Dale had presented for the new initiatives committee, and what we're talking about at the airport, getting some A&P mechanics and other things. I know AirTech could probably hire a couple. But I think if we create which I think we're moving toward, creating the environment where these different things can interchange and grow, and then maybe if we had an A&P school here, and then if we had a research park, and then a 3D immersive visualization and machine learning and all these different things sort of co-located, they would probably cross-pollinate and influence each other, and then that would foster new innovation and things we can't even think of at the moment. But I think it's important that we create the environment where these things can happen, these interchanges can occur naturally and organically in a community. That's rural and agricultural and aquacultural as well, keeping that heritage. And so it's kind of I could see it in my mind based on what is being presented tonight.
There's like a value stream to change, right? You have to be aware of it. You have to learn about it to understand it, and then you can embrace it and make decisions to move forward. And what I've always tried to do is highlight these kinds of opportunities to get people familiar and comfortable. What I found through my career is leaders don't lead things they're not comfortable with. They'll just avoid them like the plague, right? I mean, they will. And usually if they're expert at something, it's like one thing. I gave you like 9, 10 things here, right? So, but these are all things that we need to be thinking about that others are already doing in a big way. Do we want to be early adopters or late adopters? It's the rate of learning. So if we can create a learning community that's open-minded and aware and thinking and collaborating and discussing, then we've got thought leadership, which ends up leadership in change. And I think that's one of the things we need to consider.
Then I think about incentivizing entrepreneurs, existing businesses, and other things, people to come here in some different ways, and kind of fostering that growth, I guess, from a governmental level. But I'm kind of new here, so we'll see what happens. But
It's a branding challenge as well as a reality challenge, right? Perception and reality.
And money.
And money. Yeah, but that all comes in, right? And you mentioned the synergies, the collisions, right? If you take an unmanned vehicle, how many different technologies converge into an unmanned vehicle?
Almost everything you described in the...
Yeah, absolutely, right. And just the implications of 5G alone is such a game changer. It's just not even funny. Sensors are getting cheap, right? AI is all about data at scale that you can make sense of, look at patterns and get relationships and those kinds of things. All this stuff fits together, but we have to educate folks. And one area that's of interest to me is you have a lot of these big companies, the Microsofts, Amazons, NVIDIAs. Where are those certification programs to leverage their tools and capabilities? And you can do that out of high school, right? You can take these, I got a certification in cloud technology from, right? Next thing you know, you're highly applicable. And that's like a jump start, into this high-tech world that we can do.
Okay, any more comments from anyone?
We also have
Teresa?
Barbara on the phone. I don't know if she has any.
She's still having tech issues.
No, she won't. Hey, Barbara, can you hear us?
I can. It's really hard to hear. The audio is very poor, but I do have a couple things to say at this. Are you doing the end of that roundabout?
Yes. So you are free to go.
Okay, I just have a chance. Oh, great. First of all, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of.
Yes, they can hear you. Moving the mic towards you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Just a couple things just to dovetail what was said. First of all, great conversation, great information. I appreciate what everyone has shared and the hard work that's been put into that. all the reports out. That was very, very helpful and definitely beneficial in helping us move forward. So thank you for doing that. A couple thoughts when we were talking about the aqua agriculture. I do think it's still a priority to look at SPAT. I think SPAT is a huge money maker for our community and something we should look to nurture and look at developing and support with our watermen and helping move that forward. I don't think it'll take much to do that, but I do think it should be on our agenda for the next few years. The next item I wanted to share was the conversation came up about the airport. I won't be at the tour this week. I saw a good portion of it when I was at the University Southern Maryland.
University System of Southern Maryland.
Ceremony on Friday. That was outstanding. I know a few folks were there. Dale, you were there, and a few others, and it was outstanding ceremony. Great kudos for our community. Just felt good about it all over. It was wonderful for everyone to be there. So, but one of the things they talked about was aircraft. Well, was mentioned was aircraft and the importance of focusing on moving young people forward in that piece. Certification is the answer. There are so many young people that would love to get their pilot's license, but they're not going to take that drive to Annapolis. So again, the thought is of bringing that to us, and how difficult would that be? I know I looked into that a couple of years ago, and I talked to a few of the players at that point, and they were willing to negotiate that and talk about that. But what it does for us is it reduces that gap that we were talking about, and it allows students to see it happening. What I've learned is if students can't see it and touch it and go and participate in it, they won't even consider it. So I think that's a big piece. And we can't forget our Civil Air Patrol. Those are young people that get involved in Civil Air Patrol. And it could be very active and proactive for our community and for our young people especially. And it is a growing community of interest, especially just being down the road from Pax River. So just want to keep that on your radar. And lastly, I wanted to share, I don't know how many of you participated in Oyster Festival this weekend. Did a lot of you go?
Oyster Festival. She was asking who participated.
Yeah, Oyster Festival is a huge success, and this is a huge success for Rotary. You know, last year they did a virtual, which is okay, but nothing's like being there and seeing it and participating in the festival and then participating in a national competition. So the folks that win go to Ireland. They represent the United States. There were crowds. The parking lot was full. In fact, there was a waiting line right on Fairground Road just to get into the parking lot. So that just speaks very strongly of what our committee wants to do. They want to get involved. They want to participate. So that's something we need to remember, because I think that's what most folks want to do. They want to be a part of a big thing. And Oysterville Festival this weekend was a big thing. All right, so that's all I wanted to share. I just wanted to, again, great talking with all of you, great conversation. Look forward to seeing you all soon.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you.
Okay. Teresa, did you have anything to add?
Well, I did want to ask about the ferries, if you know, Phil, if there's been any studies?
You brought up the ferries as far as transportation, and there had been discussion in the past as far as creating a ferry, whether it be one from the St. Mary's County side over to Virginia or something to the Eastern Shore, but it just it never really has grown legs. The areas, our roadways are getting more congested, and travel is becoming, more expensive and critical as far as different areas. So I think it, certainly would be something worth exploring. Down where we're located to the Eastern Shore, which is about 20 miles. to get to the east side of the bay, depending on where you cross. So you get down to Crisfield area is farther than that. The Potomac River, the mouth of it, is close to 7 miles across. So there is a commute, but I guess what you'd have to look at is, where is the destination that most people are trying to get to, and at what crossing point would be best to entertain.
If you were able to measure, right, data analytics, right, the number of people who have to go up to the 301 bridge and back down to go to Virginia Shore, or the people who have to go up to Annapolis and back down, and how many people don't make the trip because it's so far, right?
Right.
Anyway, so and I think the perception in St. Mary's is that you have to go down to come and go back up, right? There is no going through.
Right.
And that, I think, is a stigma from a developmental point of view, right? And if we want more traffic, tourism, business, I like that one picture you had up there of the launches up to the different the cities and stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking urban mobility, right? I'm thinking, little quadcopter taxis, right? Think about it. I mean, there you are.
There's actually a restaurant that's attached to Virginia out in St. Mary's Waters across from Piney Point, Tall Timbers. That's actually St. Mary's County business, and it's only accessible if you go 2.5 hours by car or have a boat.
Wow.
So even
Coles Point Tavern.
yeah, intermittent ferry
interesting.
service to that. Some county residents might appreciate that,
Well, it's also a notoriety, right? It's something that's different, it's distinctive, that kind of sets us apart. We need to have a number of those kinds of things that kind of form a mental model, right, of how people think about the county.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, and that's what Gerald was just saying. They did restart the Smith Island ferry to from Point Lookout to Smith Island. That
Really?
takes, but it's basically tourists that it takes over to Smith Island. That it didn't run last year because of COVID, but they started it up again this
I didn't know that, yeah.
So, and actually a ferry too. Once you get to Crisfield, it's only about an hour to Ocean City drive at that point. So if you had some type of ferry that left St. Mary's County, and with the Bay Bridge and the traffic and the congestion, and some people that, especially in the lower counties or tri-county area, may elect possibly to go that route versus, as you're speaking of, going all the way up to the...
Imagine the gas you'd save, right? I mean...
Yeah.
When you guys
Imagine the
say
time you'd save. I mean, during
it would open up all the options.
a 5-hour trip to Ocean City.
Oh, yeah.
When you guys say ferry, you're talking like, because I've been to Seattle, SeaTac before, and I rode on a big ferry that had multiple vehicles on it. You're talking that size ferry?
Yeah, different sizes, but that's the one I'm used to.
Car
In
ferry,
Vashon
okay.
Island, it's running all the time. You have residents on the island, and they have one down to Tacoma, at the same time, so.
Lewis, Cape May.
Yeah, Cape May, right, you're right.
Block Island, Rhode Island, Stanton Island.
It just would be,
mainland
I think it would be a
there.
game changer, I think it would be a game changer.
You're right. It would create a throughput.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, no, it would keep us from being as isolated as we are,
Yeah,
and it would help with connectivity.
help with growth.
And I'll tell you, from a NavAir perspective, the fleet in Norfolk would absolutely come here more often. And that's a big deal, because they don't come here much. So we're working for the warfighter, but the warfighter's not on board, not with us, right? We don't really have that interaction that we need.
Okay, well, if that's everything, I move to adjourn in the October 20th, 2021 meeting of the EDC. Do I have any seconds?
I second. Lynn.
Motion seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.